Invocation. Be aware of the heart and the crown chakra. To the Supreme God, Divine Father, Divine Mother, thank you for your priceless blessings, for your divine light, divine love, divine power, divine healing, guidance, mercy, help, and protection. Thank you. To our great spiritual teacher, to all the great spiritual teachers, to all the great gods and goddesses, to all the great, great ones, we very, very humbly thank you for your great blessings. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. We also give a thanks to Sri Neem Karoli Baba. We'll say to the great, great soul called as Neem Karoli Baba. We genuinely, very, very humbly thank you for guiding us with your priceless teachings from the stories that you've shared or you've allowed to be shared. We also thank your great student Ram Das for writing a brilliant book, correlating all the stories without any added spices in between. We are very, very grateful to both of you. We are extremely, extremely grateful. Thank you for continuing to guide us. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, let's continue. The touch of grace. In India, page 303, yeah, over here, but the book's page is 283. The touch of grace. In India, where there is no social security for old age, one's sons become one's security. When women marry, the wife comes to live in the husband's home so that he remains with his family. Thus, to Maharaj Ji came many people who yearned to have a child, and most particularly a son. Maharaj Ji was known to be able to make fertile the unfertile and to determine the sex of a child. Most often he didn't interfere, but every now and again he granted what was considered a great boon. Now, when my wife and I started our family, we had three daughters. This was not of concern to me, but my own mother became very anxious for a grandson. Maharaji told me that I would have a son. I said that I didn't wish for a son, and he said, "You don't wish for a son, but your mother does. Now you will have sons, many sons. If you wish for sons, you will have them. If you wish, you will have sons and sons and sons." When my wife was again pregnant, about 7 months, Bharatji was in Kenchi and said, "Well, Siddhima, Shiv Singh has a son. A son is born there." But he was not born yet. 2 months later, our son was born. By the way, remember at seventh month, he says the son is born. It's like the soul is anchored at that time, no? But soul doesn't have a gender. But soul is anchored, which means it has somehow grounded itself, has anchored to the physical body now. So a son is born. But he was not born yet. 2 months later, our son was born. We put him on Maharajji's lap. Maharajji, this is your fruit. He blessed the boy and said, "You will have sons now. God has no scarcity of sons in his regime. You will go on producing sons now. Now, no daughters, sons and sons." All right. You need not necessarily have faith in order to receive grace. This is beautiful and interesting. You necessarily need not have faith in order to receive grace. Maharajji once said to a tourist couple who had come to Kenchi from eastern UP, "You have three daughters, you want a son, all right, bring me 10 bags of flour." "Maharajji, how should I send it? I'm from far away." "I know you're from far away. Go to Haldwani to this shop and they'll arrange it." The man went to the shop and arranged 10 bags of flour be sent, the total cost of which was such that he had only enough for gas and expenses to get home. Later, they had a son. And that is amazing. This is like somehow you remember how the mechanism of karma works, right? Like if you want a good smooth life, you keep giving to charitable causes, make other people's life better, and the good karma comes back. So you plant seed for your own grace to come in that sense, right? In the form of karma. So likewise, he gave so much worth of lore from which good work was supposed to be done to people, and the karma just came back to him in the form of sun, for example. Interesting, by the way, if you think about it. A lawyer and his wife, who had not had children, came to Maharajji for help. He gave the man a guava and said to give it to the wife, and they would have children. The man thought how his brother's five children seemed as though they were his own. What did he really need children for? So he put the guava on his puja table. A month later, he gave the guava still in perfect condition to a friend who also had no children. The couple ate it, and now they have three children. Wow, that's cool, man. Cool blessing technique, no? A man who had no children came to Maharajji, who said, "You build a well here at the temple and you will have children." And so it happened. I met that man's son who himself now has two sons. Maharajji told the father, "You construct a well and your boat will keep floating," meaning that the family line would go on. So it basically, you are also able to understand, right? He's not just, he's basically saying you do this for benefit of people in a way. Then he's saying, okay, by the way, take this blessing also. So it's like you do something for me and I do something for you. It doesn't require a faith all the time. It just requires you to act. Once a chauffeur was driving Maharajji up to Nainital to visit some devotees. When he came to a steep hill, after the hill, the chauffeur debated with himself whether to push the car to excess in order to make the hill. He didn't want to break the car, but because he had Maharajji in the front seat, he decided to try it. When they arrived, Maharajji said, "You don't have any children." "No, Maharajji." "How long have you been married?" "19 years." "Here, eat this apple, you'll have a child." 10 months later, his wife had a son. The chauffeur said, "For such a little thing, Maharajji would do a big thing." Wow, it's good, no? Wow, it's good. It's beautiful. But it was not only for children that Maharaji bestowed his touch of grace. His touch healed, brought economic prosperity and spiritual growth as well. A very ill relative, a young boy who had been quite strong, had been committed to a hospital, and his situation deteriorated to the point where doctors gave up hope for saving his life. When Maharaji came to the hospital room, he touched the boy on the head and remained with him for a short time. The hospital staff and patients assembled to have Maharajji's darshan. So Maharajji distributed prasad and left for Kenchi. The boy began to recover immediately. It was like a second birth for him. Wow, 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 wow. Someday we all should aspire to be like this. The brother of Jay said, "We were doing kirtan and we expected Jay, who drank to excess, to come and quarrel with Maharajji. He came rushing toward Maharajji. From the first touch of Maharajji, he was changed. He stopped drinking and hasn't drunk since, and that was some years ago." Mrs. P said, "I didn't want to see any gurus, so I decided I'd just let go and take pictures. But I arrived to find that the door wasn't open. Later, someone told me just to walk up and down in front of the door, and Maharaji would open it. Suddenly, Maharaji opened the door and said, 'Go away.' I replied, 'I'm not going.' 'Oh my goodness, you're a very stubborn woman. What do you want?' I replied that I wanted a photograph. He said, 'All right.' But I replied, 'No, you have to come outside. It's too dark in the room.' Maharaji replied, 'The photo will come out.' I argued with him, and Maharaji again said, 'You're very stubborn. Do you want to become a doctor?' Oh God. I said, 'Even in my dreams, I couldn't become a doctor because I'm such a second rate student.' Then Maharaji touched me on the head and spoke some mantra. Shortly after, I was admitted to medical college where I got a top distinction. Wow, that's so cool, man. That's so cool. Wow. Where is Maharaji when I needed him in, in case of my help with my school? A certain man was staying in the ashram whose wife had recently died and whose business was ruined. Maharaji called for this distressed man and asked him to play his flute. The man played Raghupati Raghav Raja Ram. And Maharaji sat still, with tears flowing from his eyes. Maharaji took the man alone into a room, and when the man came out, he was happy. He said that Maharaji has touched his foot to his head. Maharaji told the devotee to give the man some money and send him home. Maharaji's blessings have sustained the man and his family ever since. Wow, see, wife had died, business has ruined. Wow, wow, that's remarkable actually. One day in 1968, Maharaji sent word that a group of 9 of us would go for a ride in the Land Rover. After one stop at an apple orchard, we went up to the mountains to a rest house owned by Forestry Service. The servants there obviously were expecting us and were delighted at Maharaji's presence. Maharaji went immediately into the building, which appeared to consist of one large room, and Gurudat Sharma went inside with him. We all sat out on the lawn. Then Gurudat called me. I think this is by Ramdas, most likely. Yeah, RD, exactly. I think I've started to realize how he writes also, the way he writes his stories. Gurudat called me. I ran in and found Maharaj sitting on a tucket, and I knelt at his feet. Only the three of us were present. Maharaj looked closely at me, then closed his eyes for a moment and said, "You make many people laugh in America." I thought of my lecture style, which consisted of much humor, and I replied, "Yes, I guess so." "You like to feed children." That was a strange one. "I love to cook for people, and I certainly like children." So I said, "Yes, I guess so." Then he reached toward me, tapped me 3 times on the forehead. The next thing I recall is Gurudat Sharma leading me by arm out of the door and the brilliance of light outside. Few minutes later, we all piled back to into the Land Rover and returned to the temple. What was it all about? What was it an initiation? What had happened to me? I recalled the story of Ramakrishna touching Vivekananda on the chest with his foot and putting him into samadhi until Vivekananda yelled, "But what about my family?" For they were dependent on him. At that point, Ramakrishna removed his foot and Vivekananda returned to normal consciousness. Wow, wow, wow. Was this a similar event? Many months later, in a letter to me in America, Haridas said, "The day you were in a very high state, when you came outside, tears were streaming down your cheeks. I don't remember that at all." Wow. Over the years since then, I've asked many devotees about their incident, but have never received a clear answer. Some said it was a boon, others pointed out that Maharajji was in habit of masking important initiations so that they looked like nothing had happened. Another devotee told me that the Guru could awaken Kundalini energy in a devotee with a touch. The matter is still not clear. At the time, it only seemed to increase my confusion. But but that was Maharajji's way. Wow. I'd been teaching in America, but felt that my impurities were contaminating my teaching. So when I came before Maharajji in 1971, I asked that he make me pure enough to serve him in sharing the Dharma in the West. At that time, he hit me on the head and said, "You will be." That seemed like a true boon, and I accepted it as such. But some months later, when I was still in India, I continued to be aware of and often overwhelmed by my impurities. So again, I asked Maharaji to make me pure. At that time, he looked me over and carefully said, "I don't see any impurities." Well, and good for him to say that. After all, he saw God in everyone. But I wasn't satisfied. I wanted to feel pure. At any rate, I persisted in complaining. Then one day I was called to call into a back room into which I had never been before, where Maharaji remained at night. Maharaji was on his tucket, and S.L. Shah, who was a great Ramayana student and had become my deep friend and trusted teacher, was also present. Maharaji asked me what I wanted, and I said I just wanted to be pure enough to serve him. Then he went under his blanket. There were strange movements under the blanket, followed by some snoring. Hey, that's so cool, no? It's like, the blanket feels like that a magician's They put and then they do whatever they do, abracadabra, right? You know what I'm saying? It did something, something comes out. So feels like that, exactly like that. So Maharaj was on his, then he went under his blanket. There were strange movements under the blanket, followed by some snoring. I felt deep peace and curiosity as well. Then he came out from under the blanket and tapped me on the head and said, "You will be." Later, S.L. Shah said that under the blanket, Maharaji had been doing mudras, specifically tantric body movements designed to bring about certain effects. Shortly before that incident, Maharaji was reported to have said to KK about me, "I'm going to do something for him." This is by Ramdas, by the way. "I'm going to do something for him." Perhaps this was another of those underpaid initiations nobody seemed to know. Maharaji didn't say, and I still felt impure. On the last day I was with Maharaji, I said, "Maharaj, you promised me that I would be pure enough to do work in the West, and I don't feel that I am." Maharaji looked mildly interested in that observation, then handed me a mango which he had been holding and said, "Here, eat this." I had often heard about Maharaji giving boons to people, sometimes by piece of fruit, sometimes by means of piece of fruit. At the first opportunity, I went into the latrine to eat the mango so I wouldn't have to share it with anybody. I debated whether to hold on to the seed or to get more mango boons, but finally I discarded that plan as being too clever. As it is now 6 years since that day, and slowly, very slowly, the impurities are falling away. It takes time, no, for the impurities to fall away. Wow, such a great teacher, man. कृष्ण प्ले इसको बोलते हैं कृष्ण लीला in Hindi. It seems at once surprising and obvious to note that Maharaji was quite different in quality of his relationship with men and with women. With men, he hung out and gossiped and scolded and guided his friend, father, and sage. With the women, on the other hand, in addition to those roles, he seemed frequently to assume roles like that of Krishna, one of the forms of God in the Hindu pantheon, as child and playmate and lover. Such play on Maharaji's part, of course, created some consternation and confusion among devotees. Oh, one second. What? With the women, on the other hand, in addition to these roles, he seemed very frequently to assume roles like that of Krishna, which is a child and a playmate and a lover. Such play on Maharaji's part, of course, created some consternation and confusion among the devotees, and also grounds for criticism on the part of people who did not like to or trust Maharaji. But for the women devotees who were directly involved with Maharaji in this way, his actions served as a catalyst to catapult them to God. Wow, this is interesting. Once, when Maharaji was entering a room, the mothers decided to hide behind the door so he wouldn't see them. He said, "Where are they? How could they leave? How can they leave me? They cannot leave me. How can I go on? How can I bear to be without them?" He was trying to pull on a sock. Finally, they had so much pity, they rushed out to him. When Maharaji went to another plane of consciousness and came back, the mothers would kid him like a daddy coming home from work. "What have you brought us, Maharaji?" Oh, how cool, man. What have you brought us? Several mothers went into the temple for darshan, only to find Maharaji and a male devotee sitting behind a barbed wire fence. Maharaji said to them, "Oh, you women say that Baba is nothing and only has his feet rubbed by women. But now you see you can't get behind the wire." The man was rubbing Maharaji's feet and began reciting a verse from the Ramayana. One Ma answered his song with another verse from the Ramayana. This pleased Maharaji and he asked them to come closer. Then the Ma said, "You have come as an incarnation in the mortal form into the world for us." Oh, it's good, no? One man said, "My wife just wanted to sit and be with Maharaji. She didn't want to talk. She was too shy." R's wife was very reluctant to speak of Maharaji and her feelings about him. But she had a loving look on her face, and with her eyes and small nods, she responded to comments. When asked if Maharaji ever seemed like her own child, She looked especially warm and she nodded, smiling. Mother Maharaji would be the child, be the parent, be the friend, be the guide, be the teacher, be the spiritual guru, be the lover also in some cases. Wow. We'd be sitting outside and Maharaji would pull my hands under the blanket and make me massage his legs, almost pulling me under the blanket. I loved touching him. But I was not sure how far can you go in touching Maharaji. I'd be working on his feet and calves, and he'd grab my arm and pull my hand up to his thigh. So I'd do his thighs for a little bit, and then my hand would start wandering around to his calves again. Because all of a sudden, I'd look around and see people staring at me. An Indian woman would be gasping, and I'd get embarrassed, really embarrassed. So I'd start working up on his feet again. Then this would come sliding down and grab mine and pull it up again. He would often perform this puzzling ritual with me, and if I tried to explain it to myself, no sooner would I have the thought that he'd turn to me and yell, Nahi, and then go on with his conversation. Oh, interesting. Very interesting. Hmm. I also, by the way, think that sometimes certain parts of the body they represent specific aspects. I don't know what they are. I'm just assuming right now. No idea. One Indian widow who had no children came to Maharaji, worried about who would take care of her. Maharaji said, Ma, I'll be your child. She started to treat him like a child, and then he said, You know, Hari Kishan Baba, sorry, Hariya Khan Baba used to suck the breast of women. I'll sit on your lap. He sat on her lap, and he was so light and small, just like a child. He sucked on her breast, and milk poured out of them. Really? That's fancy. Although he was 65, enough milk came from her to have a filled a glass. After that, she never missed not having children. That is interesting. Very, very interesting. Purely like pure love, but very interesting story, no? I felt a great deal of fear of Maharaj and explained and experienced a kind of awkwardness with him, wanting so much to do the right thing, yet afraid that I wouldn't know what that was. He called me into his room in Kenchi one day. Of course, it always happened on the days when you really needed it. He had me close the doors and was up on the tucket. I was sitting on the floor, and he leaned down to hug me. I reached out to hug him back, and he meant for me to come even closer. He said, Come closer, come closer. You're not close enough. And he just lifted me off the ground onto the tucket and into his arms. He put his arms in his blanket all the way around me. He absolutely covered me with his blanket and his being. He swallowed me the whole. I melted all my fears, all that stuff totally vanished into the sea of Maharajji. I was completely out of my body, totally immersed. So that's how he answered all those questions, just by one hug. Wow. I was kneeling before Maharajji when he grabbed at my sari and started pulling at it. Then he was holding my breast and saying, Ma, Ma. I felt for the first time as if I was experiencing an intimate act free of lust. Wow. The word free of lust is so beautiful, no? No lust. And that's so beautiful. There are stories about gurus doing things with women, but somehow around Maharajji there was a feeling of such purity that people could tell me anything he had done, and it never shook my total trust in him at all. It was clear that he needed nothing, he had no desires of his own. I believed that he would do things with women for whom the sexual part of their life was not straight. In retrospect, it looks as though it served a very direct function for them. Like he would do things because it would be functionally important to do certain things, not that he had any desires. For example, that devil story of sucking the woman's breast and the milk came out. The woman probably never had a child. The woman was probably yearning for an experience, and came along that way and he probably provided with the experience. God knows. Similar to other things also. We were singing in front of Maharaj and I was massaging his arm when suddenly a sexual thought with regard to him came to my mind. I was embarrassed because he was looking into my eyes, so I immediately quit massaging his arm and started saying Ram in Hindi with my finger on my own arm over and over again, still holding his gaze the while. At that point, the thought faded. Maharaji reached over right then and pulled gently on the ring I was wearing at the time in my nose, turned my head sideways, and pointed out my nose ring to an Indian nearby. See? He said sweetly, she's very good. Wow, it's beautiful. The brother of Jay said, we are doing kirtan and we expected Jay, who drank to excess, to come and quarrel with Maharaji. He came rushing towards Maharaji. Hey, we already read this. So it's the first repeat story, by the way, of the whole thing. That's amazing. Mrs. P said, I didn't want to see any gurus. No, one second. Why are we here? Didn't we cover all this? We covered all this. Oh, yeah. Page number, yeah. The first time he took me in the room alone, I sat up on tucket with him. And he was like a 17-year-old jock who was a little fast. I felt as if I were 15 and innocent. He started making out with me. Really? That's amazing. That's so different. And it was so cute, so pure. I was swept into it for a few moments, then grew alarmed. Wait, this is my guru. One doesn't do this with one's guru. So I pulled away from him. Then Maharaji tilted his head sideways and wrinkled up his eyebrows in a tender, endearing, quizzical look. He didn't say anything, but his whole being was saying to me, don't you like me? But as soon as I walked out of that particular darshan, I realized I started getting so sick that by the end of the day, I felt as if I had vomited and shit out everything that was ever inside of me. I had to be carried out of the ashram. So on the way, we'd stopped by Maharajji's room so I could pranam to him. I kneeled by the tucket and put my head down by his feet. And he kicked me in the head, saying, get out of here. I was unable to move for the next 3 days, but after that, I felt perfectly well again. And I had worked through a lot of my reactions to that darshan, revulsion, confusion, and so forth. That was the first time, and I was to be there for 2 years. During my last month there, I was alone with him every day in the room. There was a progression of comprehension. He seemed in one way to be turning me into a mother, helping me to understand that sex is okay. Sometimes he would just touch me on the breasts between my legs, saying, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine, all is mine, you are mine. You can interpret it as you want, but near the end in these darshan, it was as though he were my child. Sometimes I felt as though I were suckling a tiny baby. Although he didn't change in size physically, he seemed to become very small in my arms. It was a beautiful transformation. Wow. Like it's almost like this may seem very weird to all of us who are probably attending this session. But if you see it in the way nature has designed things, or we don't admit nature's designs. We have our own societal interpretations that are feeding up how things should be. And Maharaji, the great teacher who is already in touch with God and completely one with nature, he knows exactly what everything is for. So Sometimes for some people it really takes a lot of pushing around and experiences to allow these things to come to surface, and then they can deal with it. If things don't come to surface, they don't deal with things. For example, um, there are people who are making extremely good money in business and doing fantastic in their lives and career wise super progressing, but their relationships are not good. For example, eventually some bad situations come up and they have to they're forced to look into the relationship aspect of their life, eventually come up with good solid realization. Okay, this aspect is completely lacking in my life. Now I'll focus on this. And unless things come up, unless you start, your head is completely filled with them, there is no purification, there is no performance in that area also. You just biased, and that's how it is. So this is very important. Bad situations in life are very welcome. They show you more about yourself than about the other person. Other persons are always going to be there now, this or somebody else or whatever. But it shows mostly about who you are in that situation, how you are, what is your mental makeup, how is your emotional makeup in that situation, what your motives are in that situation. So situations are very, very important. They are basically two test of character. So don't judge yourself in those situations, okay? Learn from them. Learn from them as best as you can at the largest possible extent. Be a good student, be a good learner. Don't be somebody who self-judges and self-criticizes, yeah? Maharaji had called me into a small room in his Kenchi ashram and asked me to sit on the stucket with him. He then began calling me Ma, Ma, and said to me, half in English, half in Hindi, Meri mother, Meri mother. As he did so, it seemed as if his body had shrunk in the size of a baby's in diapers before my eyes. I held him in my arms and rocked him like a baby. Wow. I was sitting on the floor looking at Maharaji, and he was on his tucket looking back at me. By the way, do you know there is something in the eight siddhis when you are master of, when you become self-realized or God-realized, one of the siddhis called anima, Anima. Anima is when you can shrink your size. It's one of siddhis, by the way. Physically shrink your size. Very part of the expression that we're seeing right now is probably that. I was sitting on the floor looking at Maharajji, and he was on his tucket looking back at me. When he started talking to me in a way that I could understand totally everything he was saying, then he pounded on the tucket because he wanted me to sit up there with him. And I was trying to figure out where to sit. How were you supposed to sit on the tucket with him? He pounded on the tucket closer to him. And so I moved over a little bit and then decided, well, go for the broke. And I sat right in front of him, cross legged. I was understanding everything he was saying, but as soon as my mind would start working, naturally I wouldn't understand anything. Then he kissed the palms of my hands, grabbed me, and pulled me toward him, hugging me. A famous hug. Then it was as if I were looking through his eyes. I could see everything in the room, including everything behind me, and I seemed to be sitting in him, inside him, totally immersed inside him. I don't know how long we were in there. Wow. Maharaji was the only being I've ever met who would seem to do anything to get you free. It wasn't as if he had an image to maintain. His teaching was beyond any form of structure. Every other teacher is either a Hindu or a Buddhist or something else. But Maharaji wasn't like that. Wow. Just before Maharaji left his body, an old woman came to temple with her children and grandchildren. She put her hand on Maharaji's head and gave him a blessing of a very long life. She did it twice in Sanskrit. May you be blessed with many years of long life. Maharaji was crying. Did you hear what she said? Did you hear what she said? His delight was that of a child. Wow. Now with men. Maharaji often spoke to the male devotees about women. Through many conflicting statements, he seemed to be spelling out a most subtle teaching. One of the cosmic questions he asked me, totally out of the blue, was, "What is a woman?" Christ and Hanuman saw all women as the mother. You have to understand the mother to realize God. Wow, this is beautiful, no? Christ and Hanuman saw all women as the mother. You have to understand the mother to realize God. About a school for girls being built, Maharaji commented, "Educate the girls and they will educate society." Wow, this is beautiful. Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao Andolan, remember? Indian government, God knows where it went, but on the other hand, he said, "See all women as mothers, serve them as your mother. Even when you see the entire world as the mother, the ego falls away. A pure woman is better than 100 yogis. Women are more open to love God." See all women as mothers, serve them as your mother. When you see the entire world as the mother, the ego falls away. This is something to really think and practice, experiment on, by the way. Very powerful statement. When you see the entire world as the mother, the ego falls away. When you see the entire world as the mother, the ego falls away. Okay? A pure woman is better than 100 yogis. Women are more open to love God. It is necessary to be brahmacharya celibate, but that can be living with one woman. A pure woman, sati, wife, can take you to God in a moment. Hmm. While on the other hand, he also said, women and gold are stumbling blocks on the path to God. This is probably for some kind of people. This is for some kind of people, I'm sure. A woman is a snake. You shouldn't even touch her. These are probably those people who are very young in their spiritual journey, and have a lot of sexual thought forms and things like that. Perhaps it was a matter of if the shoe fits. Once a devotee expressed his feeling that he was embarrassed to have such attractive women around, and Maharaji replied, Your vision should be faultless." Hmm. A devotee was embarrassed when Maharaji came to his room at the university and discovered a pin-up calendar on the wall. Maharaji asked who she was. In university, huh? A devotee was embarrassed when Maharaji came to his room at the university. Really? Not even the house, university hostel, man. That's fancy. And discovered a pin-up calendar on the wall. Maharaji asked who she was, and the devotee said, "No one." Going to turn the picture on the wall, but Maharaji stopped him, saying, "She's a ma. Don't dishonor her. Don't dishonor her. She's a ma." I like this thought process. Very worthy of cultivation. I have never really thought about this in the way up until now that he's saying it, but I think it's a very worthy thing to try and see if one can cultivate it. I had almost no sexual thoughts the whole time I was in India. It wasn't being suppressed. It just wasn't pertinent at that time. When we'd go back to the hotel, I wouldn't spend much time with other people. I didn't notice women as women at all, though perhaps some of the men did. I don't remember Maharaji doing the kind of teachings with men as he did with women. I don't remember any direct sexual teachings. He would talk about women and gold a lot, about how lust was a poison, and how one of the greatest poison was for yogis was lust. When I was in the middle of an affair with a man, I was traveling with Maharaji to put a quick stop to it. So you know what? This is a woman, I guess, no? Oh, sorry. I had almost no sexual thoughts the whole time when I was in India. I was reading it like a man, by the way. It wasn't being suppressed. It was just not pertinent at that time. When we'd go back to the hotel, I wouldn't spend much time with other people. I didn't notice women as women at all, though perhaps some of the men did. I don't remember Maharaj doing the kind of teachings with men as he did with women. I don't remember any direct sexual teaching. He would talk about women and gold a lot, about how lust was poison and how one of the greatest poison for yogis was lust. When I was in the middle of an affair with a man I was traveling with, Maharaji put a quick stop to it. The first time we saw him after the affair, Maharaji told us to be a brahmacharya. Okay, that's good. Usually, since I spoke Hindi, we would just rap together about this or that sort of man to man. And often he'd let me take photographs. Sometimes, though, he just reached down and pulled me up to him into the cosmic hug. One morning after, by the way, in Krishna's thing, there's a lot of sex energy thing coming up, no? It was said that the Krishna would have divine union with all the gopis. That's probably why the appropriate place to write about these acts of union also. One morning after I had been physically intimate with another devotee, we were with Maharaji, not expecting to be with Maharaji so soon. I felt much guilt in the close juxtaposition of the two events. Maharaji pointed to this other person and said to me, "To that one you're going to give your best teachings." Then he told us to be brahmacharya and he turned to other topics. I was left guessing. Wow, women, he knew everything, man. See, one morning, Ramdas, after having been physically intimate with another devotee, maybe he had sex, of course, he was there with Maharajji. Not expecting to be with Maharajji so soon, I felt much guilt in the close juxtaposition of the two events. मतलब दो event साथ साथ में आ गए थे ना बिल्कुल. Maharajji pointed to this other person and said to me, "To that one, you are giving your best teachings." Oh God. And then he told us to be brahmacharya and turn to other topics. I was left guessing. That is interesting. All the other temples, women and men slept separately unless they were married. One night, Maharajji sent one married couple and a single man and a woman to stay at a two-room forestry guest house we sometimes used. I assume that the Westerners would appreciate the temple policy, the women sharing one room and the men another. At that time, I was feeling responsible for the Westerners' behavior. The next morning, I found out that the man and the woman had slept in each other's room. I was angry with them and told them that they were insensitive to this culture. We were all immediately called to Maharajji and asked how everyone had slept. And turning to the people who had stayed at the guest house, he asked them who had slept in what room. They told him, and he simply said, "Very good." Maharajji repeated a number of times, "Ramdas should not touch women. Women are like snake for Ramdas." Apparently, he was well aware that I, for one, could not see all women as the Divine Mother. In fact, my own fear of women had led me to seek out relationships with men. Oh, really? That is interesting. His warning didn't help in this matter. Oh, okay. But his strong injunction, which he repeated over and over again with much finger pointing, was Ramdas Kanchan Kamani, gold and feminine. Kanchan Kamani, gold and women. Every time Maharajji would say this phrase, often used in the literature and by other saints, such as Ramakrishna, to warn people about the pitfalls of attachment to sex and money, I would review the ways in which I was still clinging to those desires. And though the desires were very deep within me, it was apparent that they were on a collision course with the desire for enlightenment, and that sooner or later they were to be bound loose. But I guess am, like the abbot of monastery who prayed, "God, let me be free of the desire so I can like the desert fathers." But not just yet. I wanted to play with the sex and money just a bit more. But Maharaji wouldn't relent. Often I would be called from the back of the temple compound many times a day. Each time I would kneel before Maharaji and he would look pointedly at me in tone, Kanchan Kamani, and then send me back. It almost sounded as if he were warning me about something specific, but at that time I interpreted it as a general admonition to get on with it. I tried a variety of ways to free myself from the bonds of lust. I offered the lust into the fire in various rituals and asked God through a variety of religious metaphors to take this attachment from me, but apparently I was not ready to be free, for the attachment to these desires remained. In 1974, I met a woman spiritual teacher who explained to me that she was sent by Maharaji astrally to help me with my inner work. The major part of our work turned into sexual tantric practices. It proved to be very helpful in the loosening the bonds of attachments to desire, with which I had been struggling. In the course of our work together, she seemed to have a difficult time staying in her body. Her consciousness kept floating away because it had been suggested that the precious metal gold would help to keep her down. I decided to buy her a bracelet and a ring of gold. It was in the jewelry store that I recalled Maharaji repeated admonition to me about women and gold. Shortly afterward, I felt that much of my fear of women had been dissipated through this relationship, allowing my attachment to lust to be loosened so that I would get on with my spiritual journey, and I left those teachings. It felt like Maharaji's grace had brought me to this woman, and it was through his grace that I left her. Oh, wow. Good stuff, no? A woman visiting astrally and still taking up a physical body to help somebody work out their lustful desires by some tantric practices. That just sounds mis- like a mystical kind of thing. Maharaji once visited us when a sculptor was staying in our house. All over the living room were huge sculptures and paintings of nudes. I was a bit concerned that Maharaji might not like them and wanted him to straight go into the bedroom. But he sat on the sofa, looked around, and admired everything. He said, "How wonderful! These are good." He began to talk like a connoisseur, like somebody who appreciates paintings and knows a lot about them, putting me at such ease that I forgot all about nudity. He appreciated, admired, and asked questions about all the art pieces. Where does the wood come from? How do you do it? At what time do you do it? And so on. Maharaji could fit into any situation. Sexual energy is the power to create God. If you raise the energy, then you can feel and meet the Brahman. Hmm. Wow. Maharaji's famous blanket. Take it to Delhi. The ever so subtle relationship between the guru and the devotee is much dependent upon faith. The deeper the faith and trust the devotee has in the guru, the more readily are spiritual qualities awakened in the devotee through the guru. In the spiritual literature, the true surrender is spoken of as the surrender that is no surrender. That is, one opens through faith and trust to a method such as the guru. When such faith resonates with truth at the depth of one's being, then there is a readiness for such opening. If one is still rooted only in intellect or emotion, any act of surrender is but another act of ego. मतलब ये कि अगर आप if you are open to God from the viewpoint of emotion and thought, then that is, he says it's still egoistic at least. It's not complete surrender because there is no actual openness. That's a good way to start, maybe, but it can't be only that. Based upon misjudgment, led to horrendous consequences. So one cannot choose to surrender to the Guru. But when the devotee and the Guru have met at the depths of being, then such surrender is not actually surrender to another person, but rather surrender to one's own God nature. There was a story concerning surrender told by Maharaji devotees about another saint, Sombari Maharaj, very highly regarded by Maharaji, who had lived in an earlier time. It seemed he gave one of his devotees two potatoes and instructed them to eat both of them. The instructions were very firm. The man went down near the stream and began eating one of the potatoes. Shortly thereafter, a very poor old man came along and begged for the other potato, saying, "You have food, I have none." The devotee could not refuse, and so he gave the second potato away. When he returned, Sombari Maharaj abused him roundly for not doing what he had been told. The harangue ended in, "So it was not your bhagya, more than luck perhaps, destiny, to take the second potato." Later, the man became very successful in the world, but not successful in his final spiritual efforts in life. Matlab, first potato I think was for material success, second was probably for spiritual success. For that was the second potato. Such a story which seems to pit charity against surrender to the Guru is a hard teaching indeed. This is very important. Such a story which seems to pit charity against surrender to the Guru is a hard teaching indeed. However, we must learn finally to surrender self-conscious charity in order to become charity itself. See, we must learn finally to surrender self-conscious charity in order to become charity itself. Such a powerful line. कि मैं चैरिटी करता हूं, that has to go away in order for you to become charity. The I should go away, self-conscious. Some of the stories concerning the total faith and resulting surrender of Indian devotees around Maharaj Ji are awesome indeed, and some of their failures of faith are equally awesome. Maharaj Ji didn't make it any easier for any of us devotees because he continually sowed seeds of doubt about himself to undercut any flickering faith we might be developing. Still, we watched as our doubts became consumed into a ever deepening trust. He seemed to be leading us to the realization, once expressed by Ramana Maharishi, that God, Guru, and Self are one. Thus, we found that trust and opening to Maharaji led us only to a deeper part of our own beings and deeper faith in ourselves. I think we read about a good number of pages today, roughly 20 pages or so, I think. The fancy part, in the recent, the weekend or so, me and some of the friends from our Hadik circle, we went to Ramana Maharishi's Arunachala, which is Tiruvannamalai actually. There is a 14.5 kilometer circle that you take around a mountain as a part of the ritual. People do it without any slippers. Some people do it in socks. Some people, I did it with my slippers, of course. Some people were doing it barefoot. That is a very long walk. I mean, by the end of, I think, past last 2 kilometers, almost my entire lower part of the body was paining because I don't walk 14 kilometers on a regular basis, right? Everybody who was there, their bodies were paining a lot at that time, and that process, by the way, called Girivalam, right? And it is said that you're supposed to think a lot about God at that time, and take that round, clockwise round around it, and what else? Yeah, I mean, I would suggest that all of you at least go for it once, but try and do it on foot, please, yeah, and do some exercise before you come. Otherwise it may pain. So that's one of my recommendation. And go in the winter season, otherwise in summers it may get really, really hot. So even in winter it was really hot. So let's do a closing prayer now. To the Supreme God, Divine Father, Divine Mother, thank you for your great blessings. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. To our great spiritual teacher, to all the great spiritual teachers, to all the great gods and goddesses, to all the great, great ones, we incredibly humbly thank you for your great blessings. Thank you. To the great to our great higher soul, to our great divine spark, thank you. To the great spiritual teacher, Neem Karoli Baba, and all of his great disciples, we are extremely, extremely grateful to you for your great, great blessings. Thank you so much. Thank you. Take care, take care, take care. See you. soon. Namaste. Bye bye.